The flight to silence at the airport lounge was quiet that afternoon, filled with the soft hum of announcements and the occasional click of a suitcase wheel. Sundar Pichai sat near a large window, his gaze resting calmly on the distant runway. Wore a plain gray hoodie and glasses, and he carried no entourage, no briefcase, no sign of power. Only a slim backpack rested beside him. He looked like any travel-attired, thoughtful, quiet, but he wasn't just any traveler. Keanu Reeves sat just a few seats away, hidden behind a simple paperback book and a dark baseball cap. He noticed Sundar right away, but he didn't approach him. They had met once briefly at a charity event years ago. Keanu had remembered his warmth, his kindness, and the way he listened more than he spoke. At gate 19, a woman wearing a sharp red suit stood near the boarding queue, eyeing the passengers with something close to irritation. Her lips were pursed, her phone glued to her hand. Her voice carried just loud enough for others to hear. "I don't know why they let everyone into first class now," she muttered into her phone. "It's supposed to be exclusive." The gate agent announced pre-boarding for first class. Sundar stood, adjusted his hoodie, and quietly moved toward the gate. That's when it happened. The woman stepped forward, cutting off his path, placing her hand firmly on his chest. "Excuse me?" she said sharply. "First class is over there." Sundar blinked, confused. "Yes, that's where I'm going." "No, you're not," she replied, glancing him up and down. "You need to wait for your group. Economy boards later." Sundar took a breath and replied softly, "I believe. My seat is 1A. "Sure it is," she said, crossing her arms. "I'm not stupid. I've been flying long enough to know who belongs where." The gate agent looked over, frozen between duty and discomfort. She recognized Sundar, but she didn't move. No one did. For a long moment, no one said a word. Keanu closed his book. His footsteps echoed in the quiet tension as he walked slowly to the front. Placing himself beside Sundar, he looked the woman directly in the eyes. His voice was calm, but it carried through the silence like a quiet storm. "His name," Keanu said gently, "is Sundar Pichai. He's the CEO of Google." The woman's face turned pale. "And even if you weren't," Keanu added, "he doesn't need your permission to exist in this space." The gate agent finally moved, stepping forward with an apologetic smile. "Mr. Pichai," she said, "please, right this way." Sundar didn't gloat. He didn't glare. He just nodded and walked forward. Keanu walked beside him. The woman stepped back, silent now, her voice swallowed by the weight of her mistake. Inside the jet bridge, Sundar turned to Keanu. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I did," Keanu replied, "because silence sometimes gives permission." They boarded the plane together, but the story was only beginning. Because someone had recorded the moment from the waiting area, and by the time the flight touched down, the world had seen it. And so had Ana de Armas. She was already waiting at the terminal. Anna had been in New York for a press event. When she saw the video, she paused everything. She didn't care about the photo shoots or the meetings. She canceled her next appearance and took the first car to the airport. Keanu walked off the flight, tired. His bag slung over one shoulder, Anna walked up to him without a word and hugged him, tightly. "You keep doing it," she whispered. "Doing what?" "Being the kind of man people tell stories about." He smiled just a little. "Then, let's make this one count. It's asterisk." Meanwhile, the woman from the gate was going viral for all the wrong reasons. But something unexpected happened. Instead of shaming her, Sundar said nothing. He gave no comment.
Ow.
No tweet, no anger. He simply returned to his quiet work, but the silence spoke louder than any speech. And in that silence, people began to ask a deeper question. What kind of world are we allowing? The next day, Sundar walked into a high school in Queens unannounced. No press, no cameras. Only one note he left behind with the front desk. "I'd like to speak to the computer science club." A boy in the back row of that club pulled out his phone. He texted his mother in all caps. "Mom, Sundar Pichai is in our classroom. And that's when everything changed. Not just for that school, but for the woman in red too. Because something about that boy's story brought her to tears, and she decided to find Sundar, to say what she never thought she would, and that, too, would not go how anyone expected. The woman in red and the letter she never sent. The woman in red sat at her kitchen table with the lights dimmed low. Her name was Diane Rutherford. She had been flying first class for nearly 15 years, mostly for work, sometimes for pleasure. In her world, everything was about appearances, clean lines. Sharp suits, no wrinkles, no mistakes. But for the first time in years, she was ashamed. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her face was in every corner of the internet. Headlines screamed. Things like "Woman blocks Sundar Pichai from boarding" and "Keanu Reeves shuts down gate racism" with 3 calm words. She had tried to ignore it. But it was everywhere. What stung most wasn't the comments, wasn't the public backlash. It was the silence from Sundar. He hadn't tweeted. He hadn't issued a statement. He hadn't tried to cancel her. He had just walked away. And that silence was unbearable. She closed her laptop, turned off her phone, and looked across the room at an old framed photo on the wall. Her father stood in uniform, a kind smile on his face. He had always taught her better. Treat people like they matter, he used to say. Not just the ones you think are important, she whispered now. To no one, I failed you, Dad. Asterisk, asterisk, across the city, in a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, Sundar sipped his tea without distraction. He hadn't responded to media requests, hadn't allowed Google's team to issue statements. He didn't want to fight back. He wanted to let time do what it does. Best revealed truth without shouting. Keanu sat across from him, flipping through a small notepad filled with handwritten thoughts. Do you know she's trying to reach you? Keanu asked gently. Sundar nodded. I know. Are you going to meet her? Not yet, Sundar said. There's something she needs to do first. What's that? Look in the mirror. Not to see herself, but to understand who she's not. Keanu leaned back. It's deep. Sundar smiled softly. Truth usually is. Asterisk, asterisk. Diane did something unusual that night. She wrote a letter, not a tweet, not an apology press release, just a handwritten letter, and not to Sundar, to her younger self. Dear Diane, you were taught to be kind. You were taught to respect others. But somewhere along the way, you learned to look down at people who didn't dress like you, talk like you, or fly like you. Today, you saw a man as less because he didn't match your expectations. And that man turned out to be someone who helped build the world you live in. That's not the point. The point is, he didn't need to be someone important to deserve basic respect. You forgot that. I'm ashamed of us. But I hope we can learn. Sincerely, the Diane who wants to do better. She folded it, placed it on her desk, and cried, Asterisk, asterisk, Anna. Armas scrolled through her messages as she waited for Keanu outside a quiet bookstore. People had started tagging her in posts about the incident, especially since she had been seen. Hugging Keanu at the airport, she paused at one comment from a teenage girl. I didn't know what Sundar looked like until now. My dad looks like him. I used to feel embarrassed. I don't anymore, thank you. Anna felt a wave rise in her chest. This wasn't just about Sundar, or Keanu, or the woman. It was about every quiet person who had ever been overlooked. Every parent who had been mistaken for someone they weren't. Every kid who stayed silent in the face of small, sharp cruelty. Anna walked into the bookstore and found Keanu by the poetry section. You want to do something? She asked. Keanu looked up. Always. It's asterisk. Asterisk. The next morning, a surprising article showed up online. It wasn't from a news outlet. It was a blog post, unsigned. But it was powerful. I was the woman in red, it began. I was wrong. And I have no excuse. I let my judgment speak louder than my humanity. I'm sorry. Not because the world saw it, because one man didn't need to fight me. He only needed to show me who he was, and that broke me.
Yes.
In the best way. No one confirmed it was Diane, but people guessed. And somehow, That quiet post started a much bigger wave. People began sharing their own stories. Stories of being looked down on. Stories of being mistaken for staff. Stories of staying silent when they should have spoken up. The world didn't cancel Diane. Instead, they started changing with her. Asterisk, asterisk. 2 days later, Diane sat in a small auditorium. She had come to a public event hosted by a local school, where Sundar had agreed to speak quietly to students. No press, no stage. Just a microphone. And chairs. Keanu was there, Anna too. When Sundar walked into the room, he didn't look at Diane. Not yet. He spoke to the kids, talked about humility, about listening more than speaking, about how being underestimated is sometimes the biggest power of all. And then, as the talk ended, he turned to the crowd and said, "There's someone here today who taught me something important, not through kindness, but through change." Looked directly at Diane. "I see you," he said. She stood slowly and in a trembling voice. She said, "Thank you for not seeing me the way I saw you." There was no applause, just silence. And in that silence, respect was born again. Asterisk, asterisk. But what none of them knew was that someone else had been in the back of that room. A woman in a simple scarf, holding a notebook. She was Sundar's mother, and what she would say later would shift the world again. The mother who watched from the shadow's room had cleared slowly after Sundar's quiet talk with the students. The chairs remained scattered, the air still thick with something unspoken. Diane had already left, quietly, respectfully. Keanu and Anna lingered by the exit, greeting the last of the students and their parents. Sundar stayed near the small stage, stacking notes he hadn't even needed to read from. He looked up when he felt a familiar gaze on him. A soft voice called from the back, gentle as wind through leaves. "You stood tall today, my son." Sundar turned around, and his face changed instantly. The calm expression he wore so often gave way to something deeply human, something only a son could feel when he saw his mother. "Amma," he whispered. His mother, a small woman in her 70s, stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway. She wore a simple sari and flat sandals. Her hands were folded, holding a thin, worn notebook. "I didn't tell you I was coming," she said, "because I wanted to see how the world sees you. And today, I saw both." Asterisk, asterisk. Anna stood nearby and watched the moment. She didn't speak. She didn't move, but her eyes began to well up. She had grown up far from her father, and watching this quiet exchange between mother and son touched something deep in her. Keanu placed a hand gently on her back. "You okay?" he whispered. "Just remembering," she said softly. Keanu nodded. He didn't press. He just stood beside her, quietly anchoring her. Asterisk, asterisk. Sundar helped his mother into one of the chairs. "You didn't need to come all the way here," he said. "I did," she replied. "You've been quiet for too long. It's time people know." "Why?" Sundar's brow furrowed. "Why? What?" "Why you never speak about what happened on that train? The one you took as a boy?" He looked down. That was a long time ago. Not long enough for you to forget. Not long enough for you to stop carrying it." Anna and Keanu, still nearby, heard that part. They stayed silent. His mother opened her notebook. She had written the story in soft pencil strokes, her own way of remembering. "You were 10, she said, and we were coming to America. It was your first train ride through Delhi alone. Remember?" He nodded slowly. "You wore your best clothes, clean shirt, polished shoes, your father's tie." "Yes," Sundar whispered. "And a man pulled you off the train car," she said, voice steady, "because he didn't believe a boy like you should sit in the reserve section. You had the ticket, but that didn't matter." Anna's hand moved to her mouth. Keanu closed his eyes. "He left you crying on the platform," she continued. "But what you did after, that's what I came to remind you. You walked back into that train," she said, "and sat in the same seat, with your hand shaking, and you stayed there until the train reached the last stop." Asterisk, asterisk. Sundar didn't speak. His eyes shimmered now. "You taught yourself then," his mother said, "how to be still when people tried to erase you. And today, She added, "You did it again." Asterisk, asterisk. Anna stepped forward finally. Her voice was soft, unsure. "May I?" she asked the elderly woman. The mother turned and nodded kindly. "I never had a moment like that. With my father," Anna said, "but watching you both. It makes me want to write him, even if he never writes back." The mother reached out and took Anna's hand. "Right," she said. "Even silence becomes a gift if it comes. From love, asterisk, asterisk." The four of them left the auditorium slowly. The sun had begun to set. Golden light poured through the schoolyard fence, casting long shadows across the pavement. A reporter stood across the street, holding a camera, but not lifting it. Keanu looked at him and gave the smallest shake of his head. The man nodded and stepped back. Respect. Silent. Understood asterisk asterisk that night. Keanu, Anna, Sundar, and his mother sat around a small wooden table in an old diner. No cameras, no noise. Just tea, toast, and soft conversation. Keanu leaned forward and looked at Sundar. "Why didn't you speak that day at the airport?" he asked. Sundar looked at his hands, then up again. "Because I've learned that when you're judged, words become weapons," he said. "And silence becomes a shield. Not for me, but for the person attacking me. It gives them a moment to hear themselves." Anna whispered, "And did she hear herself?" "Yes," Sundar said. "That changed everything." Asterisk, asterisk, what none of them knew was that Diane had been walking just 2 blocks away from that same diner, holding a sealed envelope inside it. Her second letter, this one. For Sundar, asterisk, asterisk. But before she could reach the door, a boy in a red hoodie ran into her on the sidewalk. "Hey, watch where you're going," she snapped, startled. The boy turned. He was barely 13, his backpack torn at the seams. He looked scared, but he said something she would never forget. "I was just trying to read," he said. "I didn't mean to hit you. Please don't get me kicked out of the store again." He pointed at a small used bookstore. Her heart dropped. She looked at the letter in her hand, and for the first time in her life, she gave it to someone else. "Here," she said, "take this to someone inside named Sundar. If he's not there, hold on to it." The boy blinked. "Is it money?" "No," she said. "It's something more important, like a gift." She smiled faintly. "Like a beginning." Asterisk, asterisk, inside the diner. Sundar looked up when the boy walked in. He clutched the envelope tightly, walked straight to the table and said, "Are you Sundar?" Dar nodded. Someone outside said, "This is for you." Whoa. He handed him the envelope and ran back out. Sundar opened it slowly. Inside was a single line. "I don't want to erase the mistake. I want to grow from it." And below it her signature, asterisk, asterisk. But none of them noticed the 5th person in the diner, a woman at the counter, writing down everything she'd seen. Her name was Grace Lynn. She was a screenwriter, and she had just found her next film. The script of Grace Lynn sat at the far end of the diner, her fingers trembling slightly above the napkin she'd been scribbling on. She hadn't planned to be there that night. She had been walking home from the library hoping for a quiet place to eat and clear her thoughts. Instead, she found a story so human. It stopped her in her tracks. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But how do you ignore a moment like that? A boy delivering a letter he didn't understand, a CEO reading it like it carried weight, a movie star staying silent so others could speak, a woman on-glowing with the ache of personal truth. Grace wrote the words without thinking. Not every hero wears power like armor. Some wear silence like a second skin. Asterisk, asterisk. Sundar tucked the letter into his jacket pocket. He didn't say much. After that, he didn't have to. Keanu glanced at him and smiled slightly. "You gonna write her back?" Sundar shook his head. "I already did," with how I responded, Anna added softly. Sometimes just letting someone see themselves is the greatest kindness. Grace's pen didn't stop moving. Keanu turned slightly in his seat and looked toward her. He had noticed her earlier, the way she held her pen, the quiet way her eyes followed everything, not out of judgment but care. He stood and walked over to her booth. You writing a novel? He asked with a soft smirk. Grace looked up, surprised. Just thoughts, the good kind. Hope so, she said. Keanu sat across from her. Anna joined him a moment later, followed by Sundar, who gave Grace a curious nod. Grace placed her pen down and took a breath. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to overhear. I was just moved. It's okay, Sundar said gently. We were just being human. Grace smiled. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, spiral-bound notebook. I'm a screenwriter. Not a big one, not yet. But I think this could be something. Anna leaned forward. A movie. Grace nodded. A film that doesn't shout. It whispers. And the whisper is louder than the noise outside. Keanu tapped the table lightly. Tell us what you've written so far. And so Grace read. Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied. He stood at the gate quietly, not knowing his stillness would soon become a storm across the world. Not because he yelled, but because he didn't. Duh. The diner went quiet again. The manager turned down the music. Even the waitress paused to listen. Grace kept reading. He didn't teach her with a speech. He taught her with presence. And she, the woman in red who once believed importance was sewn into fabric and skin, discovered it was actually stitched into humility. Yana exhaled. I want to be part of this, she said. Yano nodded. Me too. Sundar was quiet for a moment. Then he said, only if it doesn't become about revenge. I don't want the story to hurt her, Grace replied. It won't. It'll show that she changed. And that change is the real victory. Asterisk, asterisk, the next day. Grace began working full-time on the script, but something unexpected happened. The boy from the bookstore, his name was Elijah, found his way back to the diner. He came with a box of old notebooks and drawings. I want to be in the movie, he told Grace. Not as an actor, but I want my art to be in it. Drawings. Stuff like that. Grace flipped through the papers. They were beautiful. Simple, emotional pencil sketches of people sitting quietly, people reading, people helping each other. One was of a woman in a red dress, looking at herself in a broken mirror. You drew this? She asked. Elijah nodded. Grace smiled. You're not just in the movie, you're going to change it. Asterisk, asterisk, weeks passed, then months. The script grew stronger. Word spread. A studio reached out, then another. Grace never sold it. She protected it. Day she walked into Anna's apartment with a thick folder and said, I want you to be the narrator, not just the lead. The soul? Anna agreed without reading a single page. Keanu said yes the moment Grace asked, but Sundar paused. I don't want a story about me, he said. Grace replied, then we'll make it about everyone who gets looked at like they don't belong. You just happen to be the one the world saw that day. He nodded slowly and said yes. Asterisk, asterisk, but something still felt missing. Grace didn't know what it was until she received a letter handwritten, sealed with a gold sticker. The return name was Diane Rutherford. Inside was one sentence. I would like to play myself, if you'll have me. Asterisk, asterisk, Grace read the letter 3 times, and then whispered to herself, this isn't just a film anymore. Asterisk, asterisk, the day the casting was announced, the internet exploded. Keanu Reeves, Ana de Armas, Sundar Pichai playing himself. Diane Rutherford, former executive, once vilified, now stepping forward in her truth. Headlines didn't mock anymore. They marveled, and deep down, Diane wasn't acting. She was living her apology in real time. Asterisk, asterisk, on the first day of filming. Something beautiful happened. The entire cast and crew arrived early, except for Elijah, just as Grace started to worry. He ran in, holding something wrapped in brown paper. I finished it, he said, handing it to Sundar. Inside was a framed sketch, a pencil drawing of Sundar sitting quietly on a train, seat hands folded. Head slightly lowered, but behind him, hundreds of people stood silently, watching. Learning, Sundar looked at the boy and said, this is the real film. Asterisk, asterisk, but what none of them knew was that on a quiet island far away, A young girl who had seen the original airport video had written her own script, and in it, a child whispers to her father. They didn't believe him, but someone did. That's why I want to be like her. Her father smiled and said, like, "Who?" The girl replied, "The man who stood beside the quiet one, the one who listened," said just 3 words. The whisper that reached the world. Movie was not released with fireworks. There was no grand premiere on a red carpet, no flashing lights, no golden champagne. Instead, Grace Lynn chose something different. The first screening of the film, titled The Gate, happened in a public library in Queens, the same one where Elijah used to read in the corners. Unnoticed by most, the chairs were simple, the projector old. The walls smelled faintly of paper and history, but the room was old students, mothers, janitors, artists, strangers, and Sundar sat in the back row. Not in the front, not on the stage, not as the center, just part of the room. Asterisk, asterisk, Anna stepped forward. First, she introduced the film in the simplest way possible. "This movie is not about one man," she said. "It's about the moments we don't film, the choices we make when no one's watching, silence that speaks louder than shouting." Keanu stood beside her. "And it's about how kindness," he added, "is never weakness, not even when it trembles." Then the lights dimmed, and the film began. Asterisk, asterisk. For 2 hours, the room didn't move. The story unfolded softly, no dramatic. Music. No yelling. No courtroom scenes or loud confrontations. Just moments. Real ones. A woman in red standing in the wrong. A man in silence standing in the right. A boy delivering a letter he didn't understand. A city watching from behind phone. Screens only to be changed by what they saw. People cried. Not from sadness, but from recognition. They saw themselves in the woman, in the boy, in the man on the train, in the one who stood beside him and said only 3 words when the film ended. No one clapped. They couldn't. Their hands were too busy. Wiping tears. Asterisk, asterisk that night. Something shifted. Thousands of messages poured in from around the world. I showed this film to my son. He hugged me after. I never knew how much silence mattered until now. I was the woman once. I want to do better. But the message that reached Grace first came from a village in India. A girl named Amara had watched the film with her school class. She wrote in soft, broken English, "My teacher told me I talk too quiet. Now I know. Quiet is brave too." Grace printed that message and placed it on the wall above her writing desk. It became her compass. Asterisk, asterisk, meanwhile. Diane Rutherford changed her life. Not just on screen, in real life, she stepped down from her old position in the corporate world and started something new, a foundation called The Gate. Openers, its goal was simple: fund education, empathy training, and quiet leadership programs for young people who felt like they didn't belong. The woman, who once pushed a man aside, now made it her mission to lift others forward, and she never once told the press. Asterisk, asterisk, Keanu and Anna, while promoting the film quietly in interviews, did something else behind the scenes. They visited schools, hospitals, community centers, never as celebrities, just as 2 people with time to give and hearts willing to sit still. They held conversations and out speeches, and they always carried a copy of Elijah's sketch with them, framed, unsigned. When asked why, Keanu would always reply, "Because the boy who drew this understands the world better than I do." Asterisk, asterisk, Sundar returned to his work. He didn't change his office, didn't hire new bodyguards. He continued to walk quietly through airport terminals, still wearing hoodies, still carrying the same backpack. But now, strangers came up to him not to take photos, but to shake his hand, to whisper thank you. Sometimes they said, "I saw the gate." But most of the time, they just nodded, and he nodded back. That was enough. Asterisk, asterisk, Elijah now 15. He became the youngest artist ever invited to design the poster for the International Human Dignity Summit. His new sketch, simple drawing, a train, a quiet man, a woman looking out a window, a reflection softer than her face, and behind her, hundreds of open gates. Asterisk, asterisk, but Grace knew the story wasn't done. She had begun writing a follow-up, not a sequel, not really, something different, she called it, Whispers in the Waiting Room. It wasn't about Sundar or Diane or Keanu or Anna, it was about you, and what you choose when no one's looking. She started the first page with this: every day, the world gives us a chance to open or close a gate. Not to others, to ourselves. The bravest thing you can do is hold the gate open and wait. Asterisk, asterisk, then, one rainy afternoon in a school far away. A teacher paused class to show her students the gate. The children watched in silence, and when it ended, one little girl raised her hand and asked, "Miss, do we have gates in our hearts too?" The teacher paused, then said, "Yes, and the best ones are opened by listening." Asterisk, asterisk, none of them knew that Keanu had been sitting quietly at the back of the class that day, just passing through town. But, when the teacher looked up and saw him, tears came to her eyes. He didn't say a word, just placed a hand over his heart and left. The classroom in silence. Asterisk, asterisk, and back in that old Queen's library. A little brass plaque now sat near the DVD shelf, in honor of those who chose Respect Heaven, when they could have walked away. Below that, single name, Elijah, and 3 words, I see you. The gate stays open. 2 years had passed since the day at the airport, 2 years since one quiet moment changed more than just a boarding line. The world had moved forward as it always does, but in quiet corners and quiet hearts. 8. The story of the gate still lived in classrooms, in hospitals, in coffee shops, in boardrooms where new leaders reminded others to slow down and listen, in homes where children now asked, "Are we being kind?" And in one house by the sea, an older woman in red stood in front of a mirror, not adjusting her suit, not preparing for an audience, just looking at herself. Diane Rutherford. But now she was Diane Mentor, Diane Guide, Diane Learner. She wore no red today, just soft colors, simple cotton, and eyes that had finally learned how to see others dash fully. Her doorbell rang, and she knew who it was. Asterisk, asterisk, Sundar stood outside, holding a small plant in a clay pot. He handed it to her gently. "It's a banyan tree," he said. She took it carefully. "They take years to grow." "Yes," he said, "but their roots never forget." Asterisk, asterisk. They sat by her small kitchen table, the same one where she had once cried in shame. Now, she sat in peace. "I never imagined we'd be here," Diane said, softly. "That's the beauty of growth," Sundar replied. "This doesn't ask permission." They spoke of Grace, of Elijah, of the children writing letters after watching the film, of letters Diane still answered one by one. "Some still send hate," she admitted. "Some still call me what I used to be." "And what do you do with those?" Sundar asked. "I write them back anyway," she said, "not to convince them, but to keep my own gate open." He smiled. "You've learned well." She paused, then said, "No, I'm still learning. But now I know where to look." Asterisk, asterisk, meanwhile, Keanu Reeves and Anna de Armas stood outside a community center in Los Angeles. They weren't filming. They were painting mural walls. Gray concrete turned into color. The mural showed a long bench at a train station, one man seated, one woman standing beside him, behind them a sky made of handwritten letters, each line taken from real people. Real apologies, real forgiveness, real understanding. Anna dipped her brush into a deep blue. "Keanu," said, "do you think we'll ever really know how far the story went?" Keanu wiped sweat from his brow and replied, "No," then smiled. "And that's how stories should be. They're not meant to end in our hands." Asterisk, asterisk, Graceland sat at her desk, looking out at the trees through her small apartment window. The second film script, Whispers in the Waiting Room, was complete, but she hadn't sent it to any producers yet. Instead, she had mailed it to 3 places: a school in India, a prison in Ohio, and a girl named Amara, who once whispered that quiet was brave too. Her note to Amara said, "You're the next gatekeeper. Write the next story. The world is waiting." Asterisk, asterisk, and Elijah, now 17, stood in a massive gallery space in New York City. His artwork lined the walls, pencil sketches of people listening, people helping, people failing, and then learning. The final sketch was a new one. It showed a child standing at a gate. On the gate, a sign read, "Open from the inside." Asterisk, asterisk at the gallery's corner. Guest book sat open. Thousands had signed. At the bottom of the most recent page, someone had written in tiny, careful handwriting, "I was the woman in red, but now I hold the light." Asterisk, asterisk, the press never found out who wrote it. They didn't need to. The story was already complete, not because the ending had arrived, but because the beginning had been passed on to children, strangers, 2 hearts still trying. To every person who had ever been mistaken, silenced, judged, or ignored, and to every person who saw that and stood up anyway. Asterisk, asterisk, one late evening. Sundar walked alone through an airport once again. His hoodie was the same. His backpack old. A new employee behind the counter looked up and didn't recognize him. She asked gently, "Sir, may I see your ticket?" He smiled and handed it over. She scanned it and said, "First class? Wow. Enjoy your flight, sir." He nodded politely. Just before he walked through the gate, he turned back and said, "Thank you for seeing me." The girl paused, confused, but smiled, of course. And with that, Sundar walked on board, sat in his seat, and opened a small book of poems on the first page, written in faded ink. "When we listen with kindness, we open gates no one else can close." Asterisk, asterisk, and somewhere, far away, a new story had just begun.